Good afternoon. Thank you for coming today. As usual, I will start off. I'll then turn it over to our Director of the Office of Management Budget, Ann Vasali, and I might pop up again here and there during the presentation. But this slide looks pretty similar to a slide that we've done every year, because our budget is really about a reflection of our values. And you heard me talk a lot about those values last week. And the most important of those is making economic opportunity available to all Delawareans, ensuring that everybody has a fair chance to thrive. We can't avoid the fact that we live in a world that is changing rapidly. The new economy is certainly transforming the types of skills that are required for good jobs. We live in a world where businesses have more choices than ever before about where to hire and expand. And as I mentioned last week, settling for the status quo is not the right option for our state. We've got to give everybody the chance to really meet their own expectations for their own lives. And that's been the driving principle behind many of the investments that we have made over the years. We're pleased with much of the progress we've made, but we certainly can never be satisfied. So our budget continues to prioritize the investments that have the greatest impact, and my recommendations focus on stronger schools and access to training, infrastructure to spur economic growth, ensuring that people are healthy and safe, and ensuring that the budget is sustainable for years to come. And while the last round of DFAC estimates alleviated some of the challenges for dealing with this year's budget, we also have to use this year's budget as an opportunity to set the state on a responsible path beyond this year, because the long-term challenges are not going to go away. And even with some budget growth this year, the growth since I took office remains less than previous administrations, and we're going to come back to that in the very last slide. The biggest impact we can have on our long-term budget challenges is around health care, and we're going to continue to talk about that today, and Ann will talk about that in some detail. And we've also got to maintain our commitment to fiscal responsibility. I'm pleased that we continue to be one of a handful of states with a AAA credit rating, in large part because we have adhered to some very important financial principles. In particular, significant focus on strong. Well, I really went over this. Let's go to the next slide. So we've made some very significant progress. I highlighted a bunch of this last week in the State of the State. The one thing that's new since then is that we just got the data on Friday. 2014 and 2015 turned out to be the two best consecutive years of job growth that Delaware has ever experienced. Clearly, the progress we've made is most importantly due to the entrepreneurs and business leaders throughout our state, but I do believe that our focus on workforce development, skills training, and the like has been an important contributor. Okay. We've made some great progress on education. Again, critically important in terms of setting up the future prosperity of Delaware. In 2011, just 5 years ago, if you think about our lowest income kids, only 5% were enrolled in the highest quality early childhood centers. Today, that number is 59%. So very significant progress and really a game changer for those kids. Our third graders received some of the nation's best test scores in math and reading in 2015. That's on the Smarter Balance. Great progress in terms of more rigorous classes for our students, and I see some superintendents here today. 3 of you in the front row, thank you. Lot more students, high school students, having the opportunity to take college classes while still in high school, whether it's through our Pathways to Prosperity program, where students get to choose from one of 10 different fields, from bioscience to manufacturing to culinary and health. 5,000 students next year, about 2,300, 2,500 this year. In addition, 2,700 students also taking college classes while in high school, although not necessarily tied to one of those career fields. The best improvement in the country last year in terms of high school graduation rates. Great progress in terms of college access. The last 2 years, 100% of our college-ready seniors applied and were accepted to college, virtually all of them enrolled, and previously as many as 1 in 5 did not. And we've got 2,300 elementary school students who went to school today and today are spending half of their day learning in either Chinese or Spanish. Big focus on quality of life because I spend a lot of time talking to employers, and one of the key factors these days in terms of being able to recruit a great workforce has to do with recruiting with the quality of life, because great workers, great people want to work in places where they want to live. And so our progress over the last few years in terms of expanded biking and hiking trails, some of our preservation of habitat and the like, really significant. Go ahead. Really great investment in libraries. People sometimes wonder, why are you investing in libraries when everybody's got access to the internet? But libraries are really more centers of the community than they've ever been before. And they are bursting at the seams. We've made some enhancements, you can go back. We've made some enhancements to the libraries in terms of some of them job centers and the like, but you can see a great representation from throughout the state of our investments in libraries. And with the budget that I'm about to present, we will have invested more in libraries than any other administration. Still on the category of quality of life, proud of our state parks. I think Secretary Small is here. I think I saw him when I came in. He's in the doorway. We have awesome parks throughout our state, and ranked first in the country by the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration. Secretary Key has opened up 70 community gardens up north. Really exciting, and to see the pride that the folks in the neighborhoods have in those community gardens, eating healthy food, learning about farming, learning the sales skills that go along with it, which is really great, and significant investment in the arts for one of the top states for supporting the arts as well. Couple specific projects I wanted to mention. Those of you who know NVF, I see Senator Lavelle here and Representative Hudson, who both, is that in both of your districts? Yeah. So this particular project, an absolutely beautiful part of our state, and this was an unbelievable eyesore because when this company stopped operating, just left a lot of buildings, environmental problems. So DENREC has done a very nice job of cleaning things up environmentally, putting some of the infrastructure in, and you can see we're very excited about some of the private investment that's going to be following soon. A similar story, not quite as far along, at Fort DuPont, another beautiful part of our state, amazing location right on the Delaware River, and amazing spot, but really underutilized, buildings falling apart, and could be so much better. And so a couple years ago, the General Assembly set up the Redevelopment and Preservation Corporation, and so some state money is facilitating some of the cleanup there to make the way for private investment later. The Downtown Development District's a great story, and to all of the members of the General Assembly who are here, I want to thank you for your support of this program. The theory all along was that a relatively small amount of private money would leverage a much bigger amount of other way around. A small amount of public money would leverage a much larger amount of private money. It's exactly what's happening, over $100 million so far. Wilmington on Market Street, within the last 6 months, I think about 75 new residential units open, including in some buildings that were just sitting empty for a very long time, falling apart. Really nice renovation and people living upstairs. Projects in Dover, and then this project here in Seaford, as you know, see Representative Short over here. It's been a long time since there's been any kind of real investment in Seaford. And this project, and I think all of these developers would tell you that it's the money that you put aside for the downtown development districts has really facilitated these things getting done. The construction has already started, and within a year from now, I think is the timing, 72 new, really nice residential units right on the Nanticoke. And it's going to be, I think, terrific for Seaford, really very exciting for that community. So Wilmington, Dover, and Seaford. And we've made these investments over the years while really supporting and protecting the most vulnerable. We rank first in the country when it comes to those youth who receive disability benefits get a job, which has been a big priority for all of us. Significant investment with the support of the General Assembly in substance use treatment, critically important throughout the state. There's not a single district in the state which is not affected. And I know not too long ago, Representative Dukes invited me down to Laurel to see a facility down there, where a private facility helping folks with addictions. We've made some significant progress in this last year, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about that in a few minutes, about some additional progress we want to make. And then again, thanks to the support of the General Assembly, big increase over the last few years in the number of mental health professionals in our middle schools. The state rental assistance program, which you funded, has been a godsend for a lot of families across the state. And there's a significant effort underway with a lot of the stakeholders at the table: hospitals, physicians, behavioral health specialists, small businesses, larger businesses, to move the state away from a fee-for-service healthcare model toward a model that really focuses on quality and value. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann, and I'll pop up again in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. So for many of you, as you know, since the start of the administration, we've engaged in a number of cost-saving initiatives and efficiencies. And the next slide, couple of slides, really outline and highlight for you some of the things the administration has accomplished with the help of the General Assembly and state employees. Many of these items were things that were suggested to us by state employees, as a matter of fact. And so I'm not going to go through each one, but just to highlight a few for you. We have reduced the headcount in the cabinet agencies by 5%, so 680 fewer people in the cabinet agencies under the governor than when we started. It does not include teachers. We've reduced the number of residents living in DHSS long-term care facilities, which not only puts them in an environment in a community that's better for those individuals, it keeps people out of the institutions, and it's also provided savings amounting to over $5 million, as well as savings associated with the Emily P. Bissell closure, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, of about $2.8 million. Private concessions, the governor mentioned Delaware State Parks and the great award that they won this year. Some of you may have been to Hammerheads at the Indian River Inlet, or the Go Ape and Ropes course at Lum's Pond. Those concessioners bringing the private sector into the parks has helped generate $9.5 million a year to help us support the state parks. We've reduced the state's energy consumption by the way we buy energy through now a reverse auction, and met the governor's goal in Executive Order 18 of having 35% at least of renewable energy in our portfolio. We've reduced the size of the God bless you. We've reduced the size of the state's fleet by almost 20%, almost 900 vehicles. And some of you may remember we took the cars away from the cabinet officials. It was one of the first things that the governor did when he came in. And we continue to move from lease space into own space and continue to renegotiate our leases, saving a total of $5 million. So moving on now to really the beginning of the process for the FY17 budget. We really were facing a long list of demands on the budget, and I'll highlight a couple of those in the next two slides. The most significant of which, as the governor mentioned, was employee and retiree health. $47.3 million was the total cost to cover the operating and claim liability for the health care fund. Total personnel costs totaled almost $100 million in looking forward to FY17. Another $48.8 for public education, and Medicaid cost increases of $40 million. Other operations throughout state government totaled almost $20 million of cost increases. Debt service excuse me, associated with the new bond sale of $18.6 million. And as the governor mentioned, we do have a AAA bond rating from all three rating agencies, which allows us the lowest cost of borrowing. Health and Social Services, $12.8 million to support substance use disorder, as the governor mentioned, community placements, individuals with special needs throughout state government, as well as other budgetary commitments, including $5 million pickup of the Transportation Trust Fund into the general fund. Moving on to the most significant cost driver of health care. This slide demonstrates that the blue bar on the bottom represents the employer contribution. So it's what the state is contributing now. The next bar, the green bar, represents what employees and retirees are contributing. If you were to hold those two constant and not make any changes, the red bars represent the projected increase in our health care costs for state employees and retirees. As the governor mentioned in the State of the State, by 2020, that cost will exceed $1 billion. So something clearly needed to be done, not only for the short term, but also for the long term. And I'd like to just take a minute to thank the members of the healthcare task force that worked. We did a lot of work and had a lot of discussion, and I think was a great foundation for the continued dialogue and the continued work that's going to take place between the hospitals and the providers. The governor mentioned this work being done by the Center for Health Innovation, changing the way we pay for health care, providing increased transparency so that when you're shopping for health care, you can look for the lowest cost but at the highest quality outcome, and change the way that hospitals are charging for their services. So I do thank the members, including the labor representatives, that put in a lot of time and effort, and I look forward to those that continued work. But we did need to take some initiatives both for the short term as well as for the long term. So the top line on this slide represents the addition in the governor's recommended budget of $33.3 million general fund. Those funds will go into the current premium structure, so no change in the cost sharing between the employee and the employer, so exactly as it has been today. This represents an increase for the employer share, so that will trigger an increase in the monthly premiums for both the employee and the employer, and the employee premiums will go up from, depending on what plan you're in. If you're an individual employee in the lower cost plan, your premiums would go up approximately $1.98 a month. If you're an employee in the richest PPO plan for a family, your premiums would go up $19.48 per month. And this corresponds to an employer contribution increase from $47.64 per month for the lowest cost plan for the employer. The employer would contribute an additional $127.48 per month for the PPO. Okay, so that's the $33.3 million. Additionally, through the work of the task force, we did talk about making employees better consumers. So making employees better consumers is not just about how much health care they consume, but also the type of health care they consume, and consuming health care that's at the lowest cost but highest quality. One of the ways to do that is a health savings account. So a health savings account is a mechanism where the state contributes money and the employee can contribute money on a tax-free basis, and that can help pay for their health care, and they can take it with them. It's portable. They can leave to another employer. They can use it when they retire. It can be invested and it can earn interest. So we are proposing the introduction of a health savings account. It will be available to all current employees. It's a great option for a lot of people, and we're proud to be introducing that. It will be the only plan offered for new employees hired on or after January 1st, 2017. So our proposal, and as the governor mentioned during the State of the State, in order to preserve, to the best of our ability, as much as possible, the benefits that we offer today to state employees, we have to do something for the long term. So this proposal would impact new employees hired on or after January 1st, 2017, and this would be the plan that they would all go into, the health savings account. But it would also be available to current employees, and as I said, we've heard from a lot of employees that they're interested in this. About 5 years ago, we offered HRA, which is a health reimbursement account. This is actually probably more beneficial to a lot of employees and retirees compared to that account. So this will be, more information on this will be forthcoming. And then two other items in the healthcare arena that were also brought up. One is the elimination of a premium benefit that's offered to two married state employees. There's a group of employees that were grandfathered in as a result of House Bill 81, so newly hired or newly married state employees after January 1st, 2012 did not receive this benefit. So this levels the playing field so that everyone's paying the same, and it eliminates the grandfathering in of employees that have double state share. And then this item below that is a similar leveling of the playing field, eliminating the grandfathering of Medicare-eligible retirees who do not contribute anything towards their state's supplemental Medic-Fill plan. So this would have them pay 5% or about $20 a month, the same as the employees who were hired or retired after the implementation of House Bill 81. So moving on to the next slide, the governor's recommended budget also contains an additional $18 million, and this would be a recommendation of a pay raise, a general salary increase for state employees that amounts to a 1% or $500, whichever is greater, pay increase for state employees. So if you make $50,000 or less, your pay increase is going to be greater than 1%. For those employees making above $50,000 a year, it's a 1% pay increase. That also, the budget also includes $16 million that includes steps for teachers, and teachers would also be receiving the 1% pay increase indicated above. We're also included in the $16 million salary increases is almost $1 million to make progress towards the paraprofessional pay scale, which we've been adding money for the last few years. In addition, $2.3 million is recommended for a 1% increase for our nonprofit contractors. So Department of Health and Social Services, the Kids Department, Department of Corrections, all do business with this group of nonprofit providers. You think of Easter Seals and others. This provides a 1% increase for them. Investing in our classrooms. Governor, did you want to take this slide?
Okay, so clearly the biggest driver for us in terms of creating a prosperous future has to do with what's happening in our schools and the educational opportunities our students receive. And I want to thank the superintendents Holodick and Garrett and Fitzgerald for being here today. So, you know, this is one of the reasons, the fact that this is such an important issue for us, it's one of the reasons that every year we have fully funded the unit count to keep class sizes at where they are supposed to be. And what I want to do now is just sort of walk through our other investments that we are making, because although we're we're proud of the progress we've made, the best improvement in high school graduation, as I mentioned, and much of the other progress, we clearly have more work to do. So I'd like to walk through these investments. So the first one, in fact, the first two were something the superintendents in particular really identified for us as being major priorities. The first one being the expansion of broadband, faster bandwidth in our schools. So this will take our middle schools and high schools up to 1 gigabyte, and our elementary schools up to 100 megabyte. And it's something that we've heard a lot about from our superintendents in our districts about, given, not surprisingly, all the activity in our schools in terms of accessing the internet. So we think this is a really important investment. They also have talked to us a lot about the technology block grant. This is money that they can choose how to deploy this money for technology, and so this $1 million is in there as well. The next is the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission. I spoke about this in some detail during the State of the State, but I think one of the areas where we can make more progress is for the underserved children in Wilmington. I agree with the conclusion reached by the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission and others that we really do need to redraw district lines if we're going to significantly change the course of education in Wilmington. But I also agree with the Commission that those changes have to be paired with additional resources for our low-income students. And we're one of the few states in the country that does not allocate extra resources to low-income and to English language learner students in our funding system. And we think that needs to change. Now, we do have a group, the Education Funding Commission, who is sort of sorting through all of these issues and sorting through what is, frankly, a pretty complicated and rigid funding system. And they will be coming up with some recommendations, but we can't make all of the dramatic changes to fix the system all at once. But we can make a start, and I think we should do so in Wilmington. And I know that the state board's vote last week has raised a number of questions about the chances of enacting the real change in Wilmington, but I really do believe that the commission is going to come up with a plan that the state board is comfortable with, that they can improve, and I think it's really important that this budget reflect a commitment to that work. So specifically, I'm committing the funding necessary to move the process forward this year. And that's $4 million to better serve low-income students in Red Clay, and also $2 million to support the transition and implementation planning, specifically for redrawing the lines. The other category that I want to mention, I've talked about before, including I think in at least 3 consecutive states of the state, has to do with teacher compensation. And research, without a doubt, shows that the most important school-related factor in our children's progress is the quality of our teachers. And I think we need to change the way we think about compensation. The fact is, our educator compensation system, is complicated, and if you review the report produced by our compensation committee last year, along with its recommendations, you're going to see that we can't enact everything, all the changes overnight. But I do want to give the committee and the other educators working on this the time to get the full system right, but I also think we need to start making progress. And so there are 2 issues that this budget addresses. The first is that our starting salaries are not competitive with districts in nearby states. They're just not. And it's gotten worse over time. And so we've heard about this from superintendents, we've heard about it from principals in terms of the challenge of recruiting teachers, starting teachers. And so we've got to raise our starting salaries. And so there's $3 million in here to do that. The other thing that we've got to do is we've got to recognize we have so many great teachers who would like to stay in teaching, but they often feel that the only way for them to make more money is to get into administration. And so this is really about creating piloting a new teacher leadership role in our schools, allowing these teachers to earn some additional compensation, but that way they can stay in the classroom, they can continue to be great teachers, and they don't have to get out of the classroom. I mean, just earlier this week I was at an event. Teacher won a big award, a STEM award. Great teacher, and he said, yeah, well, that was from last year, but now I'm an assistant principal. And we want great people to become assistant principals, but we also want great teachers who want to stay teaching. We want them to be able to stay in the classroom. So we want to pilot this opportunity. And we also are providing stipends for educators who attain national board certification. 2 other education-related items that I wanted to mention. We have made, as I said at the beginning, huge progress around early childhood and increasing, as I mentioned, significantly the number of low-income kids who are enrolled in the highest quality centers. There's an investment in the budget to continue and to build on that work. And then the other piece that I wanted to mention, I talked about it last week in the State of the State regarding the SEED and Inspire scholarship. Great program, has helped a lot of people. But I gave the example of a young woman who's was participating in SEED. She was doing really well. She had to get a job to support her family, so she ended up 1 credit short of the minimum to get the SEED scholarship, and so she lost the SEED scholarship altogether. And we'd like to rework that so those folks have an opportunity to keep that scholarship. One last thing, and then Ann will come back up. The issue of body cameras has been a very hot issue over the last year or so. The state police did some very nice work in terms of developing policies around it, but we thought it was important to actually put some money into this category. So there's $500,000 here to purchase the body cameras and also to provide some support to the Attorney General's office to review those recordings. So we think this is an important step in terms of, continuing to rebuild the trust in many of our communities, between the communities and those who serve them. So with that, I'm going to sit back down and have Ann come back up.
Thank you, Governor. Now, moving on to the very exciting part of the budget, the mechanics of putting together the budget. So we use the December DFAC estimate at 98%. So when we appropriate funds, we only appropriate 98% of those funds that are available to us. So that number, based on the December DFAC, was $4,174.3. If you were to compare our available revenues to the current year operating budget and grants and aid, and the general fund cash in those two bills, we were to the good $222.8 million. But we went through a list of cost drivers that I showed you at the beginning that totaled $241 million of demands on the budget. Excuse me. In addition, in the current year, there's no general fund cash in the bond bill. The cash in the bond bill came from one-time sources, so we need to replenish the use of the general fund cash into the bond bill, and the minimum amount that we estimate is needed for FY17 is $31.3 million. So when you take the demands on the budget of 241, plus the cash needed for the bond bill of 31.3, plus the current year operating budget and the current year grants and aid, we then go negative to $49.5 million. In addition, we had built into the budget the cost associated with the Delaware Competes Act, which the governor signed yesterday, and that FY17 fiscal impact was $8 million. Secretary Cook, over here to my left, has an initiative that's going to help offset that. That will be more information coming on targeted tax collection efforts, and that's going to mitigate that cost and bring that number down to 5.1. In addition, you'll see on the next couple of slides, we're proposing agency and program cuts totaling $18.6 million, reductions in our cost drivers of $15.2 million, and other reductions, reallocations, and the use of some special funds to total $20.8 million to bring us to a balanced financial plan, a balanced budget. So in terms of agency and program cuts, the next slide indicates that we are recommending $3 million for the open space program and $3 million for farmland preservation. We are recommending that the remaining $7 million from each of those programs be redirected to the general fund. So at 98%, that $7 million becomes $6,860,000. In addition, we're recommending that the $5 million that would normally go to the Energy Efficiency Fund be redirected to the general fund. So that $5 million becomes $4.9, and that provides a total of $18,620,000 towards getting to the bottom line for the financial plan. On the next slide, you can see that as we went through the demands on the budget, we did not fully fund each of those demands. In terms of employee and retiree health, I indicated to you that $47.3 million was required to satisfy the operating expenses of the fund and the claim liability. Our recommendation of 33.3 satisfies the operating fund, but not the claim liability. So it leaves $14 million remaining to be addressed by the State Employee Benefit Committee through some of the things that we've discussed on the task force and through the work of the actuaries. We didn't fully fund the request from the Department of Corrections for supplies and materials. In adding back the Charter School Performance Fund, which was funded with one-time money in the current year, we only added back half of that amount at $500,000 instead of $1 million. And we took a little bit off the funding for the Early Learning Challenge associated with personnel costs. Turning to the next slide of reductions, reallocations, and special funds, you can see here sort of a mix of different things from across the state, which we'll be going over in detail with the Joint Finance Committee next week. Statewide personnel cost reductions in a variety of areas of $7.7 million, savings associated with the Emily P. Bissell closure of $2.8 million. Other healthcare reductions, which I mentioned on an earlier slide. We received an increase in federal match for the Delaware CHIP programs. We're able to take a reduction there of $1.4 million. Again, moving people into the community and keeping them in the community has allowed us to take a reduction in our long-term care budget of $1.4 million. Increased billing for school-based health centers to Medicaid and private insurance has allowed us to take a reduction of $500,000, and then other operations statewide, including some reallocations and the use of some special funds, to total $20.7, almost $20.8 million. So that rounds out the operating budget. I'd like to now move into highlight some of the things in the capital budget. So moving on to the capital budget, the first item is $10 million general funds recommended for the strategic fund. And you can see below on this slide some of the businesses that we have been able to assist with the strategic fund, whether to expand, locate, or preserve jobs here in Delaware. So it's quite a good list. And that fund continues to be very important in attracting and retaining companies and jobs in Delaware. On the next slide, the governor mentioned the downtown development district, so we are recommending an additional $8.5 million in the bond bill to go to additional projects in the 3 downtown development districts, Wilmington, Dover, and Seaford. $15.8 million for infrastructure improvements at the Diamond State Port Corporation. $3.1 million for operations at the Riverfront Development Corporation. And moving on to public education, we are recommending $75.7 million for public education projects. God bless you. This includes $11 million in minor capital improvement funds, as well as funds for all the referenda that have passed, and including Cape and Brandywine, which are scheduled to go in the spring. So there's money in there, assuming those referenda pass. $18 million for higher education. So this is $6 million each for the University of Delaware, Delaware State University, and Delaware Technical and Community College, spread throughout through the 3 campuses, and working on campus improvements, infrastructure, and technology throughout all 3 campuses, and labs, primarily at the University of Delaware. The governor talked about really our historic achievement in library funding in this administration, and we are recommending an additional $10.7 million for libraries, including Duck Creek and Smyrna, Selbyville, the Route 913 Library, and Harrington. $6 million is recommended for the Housing Development Fund in the bond bill, and this is coupled with $4 million that's in the operating budget for housing development. The governor spoke in detail about the projects of NVF and Fort DuPont. We are recommending an additional $5.5 million, 3 of which for NVF and 2.5 for Fort DuPont, and $3 million additional for statewide trails and pathways. I was very disappointed to see the picture of the Gordon's Pond Trail as a result of the storm damage. That's a great trail if you've never been on it, so I look forward to its repair by the spring, I hope. I'm looking at Dave Small. I have my own special DENREC priority list that I give to him. Sometimes he follows it, sometimes he doesn't. $6.3 million to upgrade the 800 megahertz, the refresh of our 800 megahertz project. This is an 8-year project. This will fund the first year of that at $6.3 million. $1.3 million for renovations to the Delaware National Guard Bethany Beach training site. And the last 2 items, $29.6 million in agency minor capital improvement and maintenance and restoration. These are for statewide minor capital projects, and $15.9 million for statewide facility projects, which include a number of projects in the Department of Corrections, Department of Health and Social Services, roof projects statewide, the Vets Home, et cetera. And so with that, I'll just take you to the wrap-up slide. So this slide shows you our total general fund operating budget of $4,113.5 million. That budget has a 5.24% growth over last year. Transportation Trust Fund of $337.5. Grants and aid, we don't draft that bill, but we've set aside $43 million, which is level funding from the current year for the grants and aid. Bond and Capital Improvements Act at $486.9 million, which includes state projects of $236.1 and transportation projects of $250.8. And I mentioned the budget growth, but to put in really a more proper context, if you look at the last slide, you can see nominal budget growth on your left, going back to the DuPont administration, and then adjusted budget growth in the right-hand side, which adjusts for inflation and population. So even with this final budget, you can still see that during the Markell administration, we've had negative budget growth of 0.37%. So that concludes my presentation. Governor, you have any final comments?
So I just want to thank Director Vasali and the team at the Office of Management and Budget for pulling all this together. It's an extraordinary effort. It takes months and months and months, a lot of a lot of conversation, a lot of debate, and I think they've once again done a nice job. So I do want to thank all of you for coming, and we'll hang around for a few minutes if any of the reporters want to talk to us.